She walked into that Sunday lunch as a wife, but before dessert was served, her husband introduced another woman as her replacement. At the long dining table inside the Ashford family estate, Sophia Pennington expected another quiet afternoon of forced smiles and hidden insults. She had survived those lunches for years. The cold looks, the polished cruelty, the way her mother-in-law Constance Ashford spoke to her as if she were a guest who had stayed too long. But that afternoon, Reginald Ashford did something even Sophia did not expect. He arrived with Lavinia Thorpe. Lavinia stepped into the room in a cream silk dress, gold jewelry shining under the chandelier, her hand resting lightly on Reginald's arm. She smiled at everyone as if she belonged there, as if Sophia were the stranger. Reginald did not look ashamed. He looked proud. "This is Lavinia," he said, his voice smooth and cool. "She understands my world. She knows how to move in the circles our family belongs to." The room went silent. Sophia felt every eye turned toward her. Constance lifted her wineglass, waiting for Sophia to lower her head like she always had. Lavinia smiled softly, pretending to be embarrassed while enjoying every second. But Sophia did not cry. She did not beg. She simply placed her napkin on the table, looked at Reginald, and saw him clearly for the first time, not as the man she had loved, but as a weak man hiding behind money pride and another woman. Then Sophia stood up. And everyone in that room was about to learn what she had been holding together all along. Sophia's chair made the smallest sound as it slid back from the table. Yet somehow that tiny scrape cut deeper than a scream. Reginald's smile faded first, then Lavinia's. Then Constance slowly lowered her wineglass, her eyes narrowing as if Sophia had broken some invisible rule written only for her. For 8 years, Sophia had known that rule. Stay quiet. Stay graceful. Do not embarrass the family. Do not make Reginald uncomfortable. Do not let the servants see pain. Do not let the relatives smell trouble. So she had swallowed words until they turned heavy in her chest. She had smiled through birthday dinners where Reginald forgot her place at the table. She had thanked Constance for compliments that were really insults. She had stood beside Reginald at charity events, business receptions, and private dinners, letting him shine while she quietly fixed what he had broken behind closed doors. But now, standing under the cold glow of the chandelier, Sophia felt something different. Not rage, not panic, freedom. Reginald stepped toward her, his voice low and sharp. "Sophia, sit down." The old Sophia might have obeyed. Not because she was weak, because she had loved him, because she had believed patience could soften cruelty, because she had once thought marriage meant protecting each other even when only one person was doing the protecting. But this time she did not move. Lavinia let out a small laugh, soft enough to sound polite, cruel enough to be heard. "Maybe this isn't the best moment for a scene," she said. Sophia turned her eyes to her. There was no hatred in her face. That almost made it worse. "You're right," Sophia said. "A scene would require something worth fighting for." The room went still. One of Reginald's cousins looked down at his plate. An uncle shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Somewhere near the kitchen doorway, a server froze with a coffee pot in her hand. Constance's face hardened. "You will not speak like that in this house," she said. Sophia looked at her mother-in-law with a tired sadness. "I have watched my tone in this house for 8 years." Her voice was quiet, too quiet for drama, too steady for weakness. That was what frightened them. Reginald's jaw tightened. He was used to tears. Tears could be dismissed. He was used to silence. Silence could be controlled. But this calmness left him with nothing to grab. "You're acting like a victim," he snapped. "All I did was tell the truth. Lavinia fits this family. She understands the life I need." Sophia looked at him for a long moment. And in that moment she saw everything. The young man who once held her hand in a small coffee shop and told her he was afraid of failing. The husband who asked for her advice, then repeated her words in boardrooms as if they were his own. The son who let his mother treat his wife like furniture because it was easier than defending her. She saw the man she had loved, and she saw the stranger he had become. Her fingers brushed the edge of the linen napkin. Slowly, carefully, she folded it once and placed it beside her untouched plate. No shaking hands, no raised voice, no desperate question, just one clean movement. Reginald stared at her, confused by the dignity of it. "Sophia," he warned. She picked up her purse. Constance stood now, anger flashing across her face. "You are not walking out of this lunch." Sophia turned toward the doorway, then she paused. Not for Reginald, not for Lavinia, not even for herself. She paused because everyone in that room still believed she was leaving empty-handed. They had no idea she was taking the one thing they could not replace: her approval, her protection, her quiet strength. And when Sophia finally walked toward the hall, Reginald reached out as if to stop her. But he stopped before touching her wrist because something in her eyes told him the woman he used to interrupt was gone. Reginald's hand hung in the air for half a second. Then it dropped. That small surrender told Sophia more than any apology could have. He did not stop because he respected her. He stopped because people were watching. The house staff stood near the doorway. His uncle was still at the table. Lavinia was beside him dressed like Victory. And Reginald Ashford, the man who loved control more than truth, could not risk looking desperate in his own family home. So he did what he always did. He turned cruelty into authority. "Don't be childish," he said loud enough for the room to hear. "You're proving my point." Sophia stopped in the hallway beside a framed wedding portrait from 8 years ago. In the photograph, she was smiling with white roses in her hands. Reginald stood beside her, handsome, confident, untouched by failure. Back then, he had still looked at her like she was home. For a second, the memory almost hurt. Then she remembered the years after. The late-night phone calls with bankers while Reginald slept. The private meetings with investors who trusted her name more than his promises. The quiet signatures, the personal guarantees, the endless moments where she had saved his pride and let him call it leadership. Reginald never asked how the doors opened. He simply walked through them. And because Sophia did not announce every sacrifice, he decided those sacrifices did not exist. That was his greatest mistake. Behind her, Lavinia's voice floated into the hallway. "Maybe she just needs attention," she said softly. Sophia turned back. Not sharply, not dramatically, just enough for Lavinia to see her face. "Attention is what people ask for when they have nothing else," Sophia said. "I'm not asking for anything." The words landed hard. Lavinia looked away first. Reginald's face darkened. He hated this version of Sophia. The calm version. The woman who did not explain herself, did not plead, did not hand him her pain so he could mock it. "You think walking out makes you powerful?" he asked. "This family gave you everything." Sophia almost smiled, not because it was funny, because it was so small, so blind, so Reginald. She looked past him at the dining room table, at the polished silver, the crystal glasses, the untouched plates, the people who had watched her be humiliated and called it manners. "No," she said. "This family taught me what everything costs." Constance stepped forward, her pearls resting perfectly against her throat. Her voice cold with warning. "You should be careful, Sophia. Pride ruins women who forget their place." Sophia held her Haza. For years that sentence would have cut her open. For years she had feared being seen as difficult, ungrateful, dramatic. She had trimmed herself down to fit inside rooms that never welcomed her. But now she understood. They had never mistaken her silence for kindness. They had mistaken it for permission. And Reginald had mistaken it most of all. He believed the quiet woman in the navy dress had no power because she never used it to embarrass him. He believed she was replaceable because she never reminded him how much he depended on her. He believed Lavinia belonged beside him because Lavinia made him feel rich, important, admired. Sophia had made him survive, and he had called that boring. A phone buzzed inside Sophia's purse. Once, then again. The sound was small, but Reginald noticed it immediately. His eyes dropped toward the bag. "Who keeps calling you?" he demanded. Sophia did not answer. She already knew. The bank, the final restructuring meeting, the agreement that could keep Ashford Holdings from collapsing before the end of the month. The agreement Reginald had been bragging about all week, pretending it was his victory. He had no idea her signature was the one holding it together. No one at that table did. Not yet. Sophia adjusted the strap of her purse on her shoulder and turned toward the front door. Reginald followed her 2 steps, anger tightening his voice. "We are not done." Sophia reached the marble entryway. Sunlight spilled through the tall glass doors, warm and clean after the cold room behind her. She placed her hand on the door handle. Then she looked back at him one last time. "No, Reginald," she said quietly. "You're not done." She opened the door. And that's the problem. Then Sophia walked out, leaving behind the silence of a room that was about to learn exactly what her silence had been worth. Outside, the afternoon air felt almost too bright. Sophia stepped onto the front steps of the Ashford estate and breathed for the first time all day. Behind her, through the open doorway, the dining room had gone strangely quiet. No laughter now. No delicate clinking of glasses. No polished little insults dressed up as good manners. Only silence. For a moment, Sophia stood there with her purse in one hand and her wedding ring catching the sun. She did not pull it off. Not yet. She simply looked at it as if it belonged to a woman she used to know. Inside, Lavinia tried to reclaim the room. She moved closer to Reginald, smoothing one hand over his sleeve, her voice soft and practiced. "Let her go," she said. "She wants everyone to chase her. That's all." It was the kind of sentence Lavinia knew how to deliver perfectly. Gentle enough to sound reasonable, poisoned enough to make Sophia look unstable. She had built herself on that kind of elegance. The kind that lived in silk dresses, expensive perfume, and the ability to smile while someone else was bleeding. Constance nodded at once. "Exactly," she said. "Sophia has always been too sensitive." Reginald wanted to believe them. It was easier. Lavinia was simple. She laughed at his jokes. She admired his name. She touched his arm at the right moments and looked at him like he was already the man he pretended to be. She knew which restaurants mattered, which charity galas required a black dress, which families deserved to kiss on both cheeks, and which ones deserved only a cold handshake. She looked perfect beside him. That was the trap. Lavinia knew how to enter a room. Sophia knew how to keep the walls from falling down. But Reginald had spent so many years worshipping appearances that he could no longer tell the difference between beauty and strength. He looked toward the doorway, still irritated by the way Sophia had left. No tears, no begging, no broken voice asking him why. That bothered him more than any outburst could have. Because an outburst would have proved she still wanted to be heard. Her silence suggested she was finished. Lavinia tilted her head, watching his face. "Reginald," she whispered, "don't let her ruin this afternoon." This afternoon? As if his marriage had been a small inconvenience between appetizers and coffee. As if a woman could be replaced before dessert and expected to be grateful for the chair she once occupied. Reginald straightened his jacket, forcing his mouth back into a controlled line. "She'll calm down," he said. But his voice did not sound as certain as before. At the dining table, Uncle Robert stared at the beige envelope Sophia had left beside her plate. He had not touched his food in several minutes. His fingers rested near the paper, hesitant, almost afraid. Constance noticed. "Robert," she snapped. "Leave that alone." But he did not. Something about Sophia's final words had unsettled him. "If she is so elegant, then let her save your family today." That was not jealousy. That was not drama. That was information. Robert opened the envelope. The first page slid out with a soft whisper. Then the second. Then a signed letter from a legal office. His eyes moved across the lines once, then again. The color drained from his face. Reginald sighed. "What is it?" he asked. Robert did not answer right away. Lavinia shifted beside Reginald, suddenly less graceful, less certain, less at home. Because for the first time since she walked into that estate, the room was no longer looking at her dress, her jewelry, or her beautiful smile. They were looking at the paper. And paper does not care about charm. Paper does not care about perfume. Paper only tells the truth. Robert slowly lifted his eyes. "Reginald," he said, his voice low, almost stunned. "Sophia isn't leaving empty-handed." Reginald frowned. "What are you talking about?" Robert held up the document. "She's the guarantor." The words struck the room like a glass shattering on marble. Constance's hand flew to her pearls. Reginald blinked once, then twice, as if the sentence had been spoken in another language. Lavinia looked from one face to another, waiting for someone to explain why the air had changed. But no one did, because suddenly her elegance had become useless. She could stand beautifully. She could smile beautifully. She could pretend beautifully. But she could not save the Ashford family. And Sophia, the woman they had just humiliated, was already walking down the front steps with the only power that mattered. Constance Ashford moved first. Not toward the door. Not toward Sophia. Toward the envelope. Her fingers snatched the document from Robert's hand with the sharpness of a woman grabbing back a secret that had escaped too soon. Her eyes raced across the page, searching for a mistake, a loophole, anything that would put the world back in its proper order. But the words did not bend for her. Sophia Pennington. Personal guarantee. Final approval required. Without her signature, the restructuring could not move forward. Constance's face tightened, but not with regret. Not yet. Regret required humility, and Constance had spent a lifetime treating humility like something poorer women wore because they could not afford diamonds. "This is inappropriate," she said. Robert looked at her stunned. "Inappropriate?" Constance folded the paper once badly. the crease cutting through the legal letterhead. She should have discussed this privately, not staged a performance in front of everyone. Reginald turned toward his mother, still pale, still trying to understand how the ground had shifted beneath him. She never said anything about being the guarantor. Robert gave a bitter little laugh. She said plenty. You just never listened. That sentence hung over the table. Constance's eyes flashed. Do not speak to my son that way. And there it was, the old reflex. Protect Reginald. Excuse Reginald. Polish Reginald until his failures looked like misunderstandings. For years, Constance had done it without shame. When he forgot Sophia's birthday, Constance called him busy. When he spoke over Sophia at dinners, Constance called him passionate. When he came home smelling of another woman's perfume, Constance called marriage complicated. And when Sophia swallowed the hurt, Constance called her sensible. That was the part that no one wanted to say out loud. Constance had not simply watched the cruelty. She had trained the room to accept it. She had taught every relative at that table that Sophia's pain was less important than Reginald's comfort. She had taught the servants to look away. She had taught Lavinia that there was already an empty space waiting for her if she smiled prettily enough. Now, for the first time that training was failing, Lavinia stood beside Reginald, her hand still near his arm, but no longer touching it. Her beautiful face had gone carefully blank. This was not the kind of scene she knew how to win. There was no rival wife crying into a napkin, no dramatic accusation she could dismiss, no jealous outburst she could rise above with elegance. There was only a document, and a wife who had walked away without begging. Constance turned toward the front hall. Reginald, go after her. Reginald hesitated. A minute earlier, he had ordered Sophia to sit down. Now his mother was ordering him to chase her. The humiliation of that sank into his face. Lavinia noticed. So now we run after her? She asked, her voice small but sharp. Constance looked at her as if remembering she existed. My dear, she said coldly, this is a family matter. The words struck Lavinia harder than any insult Sophia had spoken. A family matter. Not our matter. Not yours. For all her silk, perfume, and perfect posture, Lavinia was suddenly just a guest standing too close to another woman's husband. Reginald swallowed. What am I supposed to say? Constance stared at him as if he were a child who had spilled wine on an expensive rug. Say whatever you need to say. Get her back inside. Not apologize. Not tell the truth. Not ask what he had done to her. Get her back inside. Because Constance still did not understand. She thought Sophia's dignity was a door that could be reopened with the right tone. She thought years of disrespect could be folded away like a stained tablecloth before the guests noticed. But outside, Sophia had already reached the bottom step. A black car waited near the fountain. The driver held the rear door open. Sunlight touched her navy dress, her tired face, her steady hands. Reginald stepped into the doorway. For the first time that afternoon, he looked less like a husband choosing another woman, and more like a man watching his safety net walk away. Sophia, he called. She stopped beside the car. She did not turn around right away. Behind Reginald, Constance whispered through clenched teeth, Fix this. Sophia finally looked back, and in her eyes, Reginald saw the truth his mother had protected him from all his life. Some things cannot be fixed by the people who only notice damage when it reaches their own doorstep. Reginald stood in the doorway staring at Sophia as if she had become someone he did not recognize. But the truth was worse. He had never recognized her at all. For 8 years, Sophia had been standing right beside him while he told the world he built Ashford Holdings with vision, courage, and instinct. He loved those words. He used them at investor dinners. He used them in interviews. He used them when his mother smiled proudly from the front row and Lavinia months later would whisper that he looked powerful when he spoke. Vision, courage, instinct. He never mentioned the woman who stayed awake at 0 inches the morning with spreadsheets spread across the kitchen island. The woman who called retired bankers her late father once knew in London. The woman who read loan agreements line by line, while Reginald complained that legal language gave him a headache. Sophia had never needed applause. That was how he missed her. She was not loud about saving him. She did not wave contracts in his face. She did not remind him that the first bridge loan had only been approved because her family name still carried weight in London. She did not tell dinner guests that the investor Reginald called an old friend had actually been introduced by her. She did not correct him when he said, I negotiated the terms myself. Even though she had rewritten the proposal the night before in her bathrobe while he slept, she simply held the pieces together. Quietly, carefully, completely. And because she did it with grace, Reginald thought it cost her nothing. Now, standing beside the black car, Sophia watched him begin to understand. Not fully, not with humility, but enough to feel fear. Behind him, Constance had reached the front hall, the document clenched in her hand like evidence from a crime scene. "Sophia," Constance called, her voice softer now, but not warmer. "There has clearly been a misunderstanding." Sophia looked at her. A misunderstanding. That was what Constance called cruelty when it became inconvenient. Reginald stepped down one stair. "Why didn't you tell me the guarantee was in your name?" Sophia's eyes moved from his face to the estate behind him. The marble columns, the iron gates, the polished windows, the house that had taught everyone inside it to confuse money with worth. "I did," she said. "The night you came home late and told me you were too tired to talk." Reginald's mouth opened and closed. "And the morning before your meeting with the city investors," Sophia continued, "you said details bored you." Robert had come to the doorway now. His expression was no longer uncomfortable. It was ashamed. Sophia's voice stayed calm. "I told you when the bank asked for additional collateral, you were texting someone under the table." Lavinia looked away. Reginald's face tightened not from guilt but from the humiliation of being exposed in front of her. Sophia saw that too. Even now he cared more about who heard the truth than what the truth had done to her. She reached into her purse and pulled out a smaller folder. The edges were neat, the tabs carefully labeled, the kind of order Reginald had always mocked until he needed it. "These are the revised conditions," she said. Constance blinked. "Conditions?" Sophia held the folder against her chest. "Yes. If my personal assets are used to rescue Ashford Holdings, then the company will no longer operate like a family vanity project." Reginald stared at her. She continued. "Independent audit, outside financial oversight, removal of discretionary family withdrawals, written acknowledgement of every personal guarantee I have made, and no final approval today." Constance's face went pale. "That would humiliate us." Sophia's expression did not change. "No," she said. "It would tell the truth." For a second, no one moved. The fountain whispered behind her. Somewhere inside the house, a phone kept ringing. The sound echoed through the marble hall like a warning no one could ignore anymore. Reginald looked at the woman he had called unsuitable. The woman he had replaced at lunch. The woman who had quietly become the only reason his family still had a company to save. And Sophia finally understood something that gave her a strange, painful peace. She had not become powerful that afternoon. She had been powerful all along. They had simply been too proud to notice. The folder in Sophia's hands looked ordinary. Plain cream paper, neat tabs, a few signatures. Nothing about it appeared powerful, but every person standing on those front steps could feel the weight of it. Reginald looked at the folder the way a man looks at a locked door after realizing the key was never in his pocket. "What exactly are you saying?" he asked. Sophia held his gaze. "I'm saying the lunch is over." Behind him, Constance made a small sound, half gasp, half warning. "Sophia, don't be dramatic." That word again. Dramatic. They used it whenever she told the truth too clearly. Sophia turned toward her. "I left a legal envelope on the dining table," she said. "That is not drama. That is documentation." Robert stepped forward, still holding the first pages from the envelope. His hands were trembling now and not from age. "She's right," he said quietly. "The restructuring package depends on her approval. The bank won't move without it." Reginald's face tightened. "That can't be true." Robert looked at him with tired eyes. "It is true." For the first time, Reginald did not have a polished answer. He did not have a charming smile. He did not have a speech about leadership or family legacy or difficult markets. He only had the silence he had forced on Sophia for years, and now it belonged to him. Constance snatched the papers back again as if holding them tighter might change what they said. "This company has carried the Ashford name for 3 generations," she said. "No banker, no lawyer, and certainly no angry wife is going to decide its future." Sophia's expression softened, but her voice did not. "An angry wife did not bring this company here, Constance." She looked at Reginald. "Bad decisions did." The words were not loud. That made them worse. Reginald looked away first because he knew. He knew about the risky expansion that Sophia had warned him against. He knew about the private withdrawals Constance called family expenses. He knew about the vendors waiting to be paid, the credit line nearly frozen, the investor confidence held together by one fragile promise. Sophia's promise. Her assets. Her name. Her signature. The envelope had revealed what pride had hidden. For years, the Ashford family had treated Sophia like a quiet accessory at the table. A woman in a modest dress. A wife expected to nod at the right moments and disappear at the wrong ones. But on paper, she was not invisible. On paper, she was essential. A black sedan rolled slowly through the open gate and stopped behind Sophia's car. A man in a dark suit stepped out, followed by a woman carrying a leather briefcase. Reginald recognized the man from the bank. His stomach dropped. The banker walked up the path, relief flashing across his face when he saw Sophia. "Mrs. Pennington," he said, then corrected himself carefully. "Miss Pennington, thank you. We tried calling. We were told the family meeting would happen after lunch." Sophia nodded once. Reginald stared at the banker. "What meeting?" The woman with the briefcase looked uncomfortable. "The final confirmation meeting," she said. "We need Miss Pennington's in-person approval before the restructuring agreement can proceed." The sentence landed like thunder. Lavinia took one step back. Constance's lips parted, but no sound came out. Reginald looked at Sophia as if she had betrayed him by being more important than he allowed himself to believe. "You were going to sign today?" he asked. Sophia looked past him toward the dining room where her untouched plate still sat beside the chair he had tried to replace. "Yes," she said. "Before you introduced Lavinia as the woman who belonged in your world." No one breathed. Then Sophia placed the folder into the banker's hands. "But I will not sign today." Reginald went pale. Constance gripped the railing. The banker glanced between them, suddenly understanding more than he wished to. Sophia stepped toward the open car door. "This family has spent years believing my silence meant I had nothing to say." She turned back one last time. "Now you can read the envelope." And with that, Sophia Pennington got into the car, leaving Reginald Ashford on the steps of his own estate, surrounded by wealth, family, and a mistress who could not save him. The car door remained open. Sophia had one hand on the frame, one foot inside when Reginald finally found his voice. "Sophia, wait." Not loud, not proud, not the voice he used in boardrooms where people nodded before he finished speaking. This voice cracked at the edges. Sophia paused, but she did not sit down. She did not turn fully toward him either. She gave him only the side of her face, enough to show she had heard him, not enough to suggest she belonged to him. Reginald stepped down another stair. Behind him, Constance stood frozen with the envelope in her hand. Robert watched in silence. Lavinia hovered near the doorway, beautiful and useless. Her cream dress glowing in the afternoon light like a costume from a life she had not earned. The banker cleared his throat, softly uncomfortable with the kind of truth money could not cover. Reginald ignored him. "What did you mean?" he asked. Sophia looked at him then. "What did I mean by what?" Reginald swallowed. "What you said inside." He could barely repeat it. Sophia remembered the exact moment. The dining room, the silverware, the orchids, Lavinia's hand on Reginald's arm, Constance waiting for Sophia to lower her head, and then her own voice, quiet enough to make everyone lean in. "If she is so elegant, then let her save your family today." Reginald's face tightened as the words came back to him. At the time, he had thought it was bitterness, a jealous wife throwing one last sentence across the table before losing her place. Now, standing in front of the house his family was about to lose control of, he understood it had been something else. A warning. Sophia closed the car door gently, but she stayed outside. "I meant exactly what I said," she told him. Lavinia's expression shifted. For the first time, she looked less offended than afraid. Sophia turned her eyes toward her. "You were introduced as the woman who understood his world," Sophia said. "The woman with the right elegance, the right manners, the right image." Lavinia lifted her chin, but her mouth did not move. "So let her call the bank," Sophia continued. "Let her pledge her assets. Let her sit across from creditors and explain why millions disappeared into family withdrawals and reckless expansion. Let her convince investors that Reginald Ashford is still worth trusting." The words struck one by one, not shouted, not cruel, just true. Reginald flinched. Constance snapped. "That is enough." Sophia did not look at her. "No, Constance. It was enough when your son brought another woman to the table where his wife was sitting." The front steps went silent. Even the fountain seemed softer now. Sophia's voice stayed steady, but her eyes carried 8 years of swallowed pain. "It was enough when you smiled at her like she was a blessing and looked at me like I was an inconvenience. It was enough when everyone waited for me to protect the family image while Reginald destroyed our marriage in public. Reginald stared at the ground. Lavinia slowly removed her hand from his sleeve. That tiny movement said everything. She had enjoyed being chosen. She had not planned to be responsible. Sophia saw it. So did Reginald. That was the terrible beauty of the moment. The woman he had used to make Sophia feel small was shrinking in front of him. Not because Sophia attacked her, but because reality had entered the room and charm had no place to hide. Sophia took a breath. "I didn't leave to punish you," she said. "I left because I finally understood something." Reginald looked up. She met his eyes. "You never wanted a partner. You wanted a quiet witness to your success. And when I became the reason that success survived, you still called me unsuitable." No one spoke. The banker held the folder against his chest. Robert closed his eyes. Constance's grip on the envelope loosened. Sophia opened the car door again. "This is not revenge, Reginald." Her voice softened, and somehow that made it hurt more. "This is me letting you trust the woman you chose." Then she got into the car. The driver closed the door. Reginald took one step forward, but the car was already moving. Through the tinted window, Sophia did not look back. And for the first time in his life, Reginald Ashford stood in the driveway of his family estate and understood the difference between being admired and being saved. The black car rolled past the fountain and disappeared beyond the iron gates. For several seconds, no one moved. Reginald Ashford stood on the front steps with his mouth slightly open, staring at the empty driveway as if the road itself might bring Sophia back. The afternoon sun still shone on the estate, the windows still gleamed, the fountain still whispered over polished stone. Everything looked rich. Everything felt ruined. Behind him, Lavinia shifted her weight. It was a small sound, barely anything, but Reginald heard it. For the first time since he had walked into that dining room with her on his arm, he looked at Lavinia without the haze of pride. He saw the silk dress, the careful makeup, the gold bracelet, the soft mouth that had laughed at Sophia's pain. He saw the woman he had called elegant in front of his wife, and suddenly elegance felt very light. Too light to hold a company together. Too light to calm a bank. Too light to stand beside him when the ground opened beneath his feet. Lavinia touched his sleeve again, but this time her fingers were uncertain. "Reginald," she said quietly, "maybe we should go inside." Inside, where the envelope waited, where Robert still held the truth in shaking hands, where Constance was already trying to turn disaster into someone else's fault. Reginald did not answer. He walked back into the estate slowly, each step heavier than the last. The dining room no longer looked like a place of power. It looked like a stage after the actors had forgotten their lines. Sophia's chair sat empty. Her plate was untouched. Her napkin lay folded with perfect calm beside it. That small fold made Reginald's stomach tighten. Even in leaving, she had been composed. Even in pain, she had given the room more dignity than it deserved. Robert placed the papers on the table. "The bank has been clear," he said. "Without Sophia, the restructuring stops." Constance turned on him. "Stop saying it like that," Robert's voice sharpened. "Like what? Like she owns us." Robert looked at Reginald, then at Constance. "She may not own us," he said, "but she has been carrying us." No one spoke. Reginald lowered himself into the chair he had occupied earlier, the same chair from which he had humiliated his wife. His eyes moved over the documents. Numbers, deadlines, collateral, conditions. Sophia's name appeared again and again, not as a decoration, not as a spouse, as the foundation. His throat tightened. He remembered laughing when she asked him to review loan terms. He remembered waving her away when she tried to explain the family's exposure. He remembered saying, "Let me handle the big picture," while she quietly handled the pieces, keeping that picture from burning. Now the big picture was clear, and it was ugly. Lavinia remained near the doorway, no longer close enough to touch him. No longer brave enough to speak for him. Reginald noticed that too. Constance sat down with stiff control, but her face had lost its color. "There must be another option," she said. Robert shook his head. "There was. She just drove away." The words hit Reginald harder than anger would have. He looked at the empty chair across from him and heard Sophia's voice again. "Let her save your family today." Only now did he understand the full weight of that sentence. It was not jealousy. It was not bitterness. It was the final act of a woman who had spent years saving people who mistook her mercy for weakness. Reginald covered his face with one hand. For the first time, there was no speech ready. No charm, no excuse. Only the terrible knowledge that the woman he had belittled was the one person standing between his family and collapse, and he had introduced her replacement before lunch was even over. Reginald sat frozen at the dining table, but Sophia was already miles away from the woman they thought they knew. In the back seat of the black car, she finally let her shoulders drop. Not collapse, release. There was a difference. The estate disappeared behind the trees, and with every turn of the road, the air inside her chest opened a little more. Her hands rested in her lap. The wedding ring still circled her finger bright and heavy like a promise that had long ago stopped, meaning what it was supposed to mean. She looked at it for a long time. 8 years. 8 years of dinners where she was corrected in public. 8 years of sleeping beside a man who shared his dreams with her, then shared his pride with everyone else. 8 years of being useful in private and invisible in public. The driver glanced at her in the mirror but said nothing. Maybe he had seen enough powerful families to know that silence sometimes held more pain than shouting. Sophia turned her face toward the window. The city moved past in soft flashes. Tall gates, quiet streets. A woman walking a golden retriever. A little girl holding her grandfather's hand at a crosswalk. Ordinary lives. Ordinary tenderness. Sophia pressed her thumb against the ring. For one brief second, she remembered the morning Reginald had placed it on her finger. His hands had shaken then, not from arrogance, from hope. He had whispered, "I'll never let you stand alone." Back then, she believed him. Now she understood something simple and brutal. He had not kept that promise. But she had. She had stood beside him when his first investment failed. She had stood beside him when creditors called. She had stood beside him when his mother treated her like a stain on the family portrait. She had stood beside him so faithfully that he forgot standing beside someone was a choice. And now, she was choosing differently. Her phone buzzed again. The banker's name lit up. Then Reginald's. Then Constance's. Then Reginald again. Sophia watched the screen without touching it. For years, she had answered every call. Every crisis. Every request disguised as a command. Every late-night emergency that began with Reginald saying, "I need you to handle something. Not today." She turned the phone face down on the seat beside her. The car stopped at a red light. Sophia slowly twisted the ring. It resisted at first, caught slightly at the knuckle as if even the metal did not believe she was serious. Then it slipped free. She held it in her palm. So small, so expensive, so empty. No tears came. That surprised her. She had cried for this marriage many times, quietly in bathrooms, in parked cars, in hotel rooms after smiling through business dinners where Reginald thanked everyone except her. But not now. Now there was only stillness. A clean, aching kind of stillness. She opened the small side pocket of her purse and placed the ring inside. Not thrown, not hidden, not dramatic, put away like a finished chapter. The driver pulled up in front of a quiet downtown office building. Sophia stepped out before he could fully turn around to open the door. She smoothed her navy dress, lifted her purse, and walked toward the entrance with steady steps. Inside, the lobby glass doors reflected her image back at her. For a moment she paused. She looked tired, older than she had that morning, but she did not look broken. That mattered. Upstairs in a private conference room, the bank representatives were waiting. So was her attorney, a calm woman named Grace Mitchell, who stood the moment Sophia entered. Grace studied her face and understood without asking. "You don't have to do anything today," she said softly. Sophia placed the folder on the table. "I know." That answer changed everything because for the first time in years, Sophia was not moving because Reginald needed saving. She was moving because she had decided what saving herself looked like. She sat down at the head of the table, folded her hands, and spoke with quiet certainty. "No agreement moves forward without full review, full disclosure, and my written protection." Grace nodded. The banker began taking notes. Sophia looked through the window at the city below. Somewhere across town, Reginald was probably discovering how much her silence had been worth, but Sophia was no longer there to soften the fall. She had walked away with her dignity, and this time she did not leave it behind for anyone to use against her. By late afternoon, the phone calls had become a rhythm. Reginald, Constance, Reginald again, then Robert. Sophia watched each name appear and disappear on the screen while the conference room stayed quiet around her. The city below moved on as if nothing had happened. Cars turned corners. People crossed streets. Office lights blinked on one by one. Life did not stop, because Reginald Ashford was finally afraid. That almost made Sophia smile. Across the table, Grace Mitchell reviewed the documents with a red pen in her hand. The banker sat beside her, careful with every word now. No one rushed Sophia. No one spoke over her. No one asked her to make herself smaller so a man could feel taller. For the first time in years, the room respected her silence. Her phone buzzed again. This time, the message appeared on the screen. "Please, we need to talk. Reginald." Sophia read it once. Then she placed the phone back on the table face down. Grace looked up. "You don't owe them a response right now." Sophia nodded. "I know." But knowing did not make it painless. That was the part no one saw. Walking away with dignity did not mean walking away without grief. Sophia was not made of stone. She had loved Reginald once. She had built a life around the belief that the man underneath the pride could still come back. She had defended him in rooms where he did not deserve defending. She had protected his name even when he was careless with hers. So no, this was not revenge. Revenge would have been loud. Revenge would have been a public scandal, a press leak, a humiliating statement, a signature withheld with a smile. Revenge would have been standing in that dining room and naming every failure, every debt, every lie, every late-night betrayal. Sophia had not done that. She had simply stopped absorbing the consequences for him. That was all. And somehow that was enough to shake the entire Ashford family. Back at the estate, Reginald sat with the envelope spread open before him. Constance paced behind his chair, her heels striking the floor like small cracks in glass. "She's punishing us," Constance said. Robert, standing near the window, turned slowly. "No," he said. "She's letting us meet the truth." Constance glared at him. "She is still his wife." Robert's face hardened, and he brought another woman to lunch. The words hit the room with the weight Constance kept trying to avoid. Lavinia stood near the doorway, clutching her purse. She had stopped pretending this was romantic. No one was admiring her now. No one was asking where she bought her dress. No one cared how gracefully she held a wine glass. The family was no longer looking for elegance. They were looking for rescue. And she had none to give. Reginald stared at Sophia's name on the documents until the letters blurred. He remembered her sitting beside him at night, asking him to listen. He remembered turning away. He remembered saying, "Not now." So many times that now had finally become never. His pride had filled every room. Now consequence had entered one. And consequence did not shout. It sat quietly at the table. It waited. It let people understand what they had done. That evening, Sophia stood alone by the office window, watching the sky turn gold over the city. Her reflection looked back at her from the glass. Tired eyes, straight shoulders, empty finger. She touched the place where her ring had been. There was an ache there. But beneath the ache, there was something stronger. Peace. Not because Reginald was suffering, because she was no longer saving him from it. That night, Reginald Ashford did not go upstairs. He stayed in the dining room long after the guests had left, long after Lavinia disappeared without saying goodbye, long after Constance stopped pacing and shut herself in the sitting room with a glass of wine she did not drink. The estate was quiet now. Too quiet. No clinking plates, no polite laughter, no soft footsteps from servers moving carefully through rooms built to impress people who never stayed long enough to care. Just Reginald, the envelope, and Sophia's empty chair. He sat across from it, staring at the folded napkin beside her untouched plate. He had seen that napkin all afternoon. But now it looked different. It looked like a final signature. A quiet goodbye written in linen. For the first time, Reginald let himself remember. Not the version of the marriage he had told other people. The real one. He remembered the first year when Ashford Holdings had been drowning in debt, and he had come home every night with a brave face and shaking hands. Sophia never mocked him, never made him feel small. She sat beside him at the kitchen counter and asked one question. What do we need to fix first? Not what did you do wrong, not how could you let this happen. What do we need to fix first? He remembered how she called an old family contact in London, a man Reginald barely knew but later claimed as his own connection. He remembered her staying up with him until dawn, circling clauses in a contract while he rubbed his temples and said he could not think anymore. She could. She always could. He remembered the investor dinner 3 years later, the one that saved the expansion. Reginald had given a confident speech. People shook his hand. Constance cried quietly and said her son was born for greatness. Sophia stood near the back of the room, smiling softly. No one thanked her, not even him. He remembered her trying to warn him about the withdrawals from company accounts, his mother's renovations, his cousin's consulting fees, the family trips labeled as client relations. Sophia had placed the reports in front of him and said, "This will catch up with you." He had laughed. "Don't be so dramatic," he had said. Now that word tasted rotten in his mouth. Dramatic, sensitive, difficult, all the little names they gave her whenever she was right too early. Reginald pushed the documents away and covered his face with both hands. The worst part was not that Sophia had hidden her strength. She had not hidden it. She had brought it to him again and again in careful folders, quiet warnings, late-night conversations, and patient explanations. He had simply refused to see it because seeing it would have meant admitting he was not the only hero of his own story. Across the room, Robert stood in the doorway. He did not enter at first. Then he spoke. "You should have listened to her." Reginald dropped his hands. There was no anger left in him, only something heavier. "I know." Robert walked in slowly and looked at the table at the papers at Sophia's chair. "No," he said. "I don't think you do. She didn't just help you, Reginald. She protected you from knowing how much help you needed." Reginald looked down. That sentence broke something open in him because it was true. Sophia had not only saved the company, she had saved his pride. She had let him stand tall in rooms where she had built the floor beneath his feet, and he had rewarded her by bringing Lavinia to lunch, by calling another woman elegant, by making Sophia feel like a stranger at the table she had kept standing. Reginald's phone sat beside him. He picked it up and opened her name. For a long time, his thumb hovered over the screen. He wanted to write, "Come back." But for the first time in his life, he understood that wanting her back was not the same as deserving her. So he typed something smaller, something truer. "I finally see what you carried. I am sorry." He stared at the message. Then he sent it. Across the city, Sophia's phone lit up in the quiet office. She read the words once. Her face did not change. Not because they meant nothing, because they came too late to undo what had been done. By morning, Constance Ashford had changed her strategy. The anger had not worked. The commands had not worked. Reginald's pleading text had not brought Sophia back. So Constance reached for the weapon she had used better than anyone in that family: guilt. At 8:17 a.m., Sophia's phone rang while she sat in Grace Mitchell's office with a cup of coffee cooling untouched beside her. She looked at the screen. Constance Ashford. Grace glanced up from the documents. "You don't have to answer." Sophia knew that. Still, she picked up. Not because she was ready to forgive, because she was finally ready to hear Constance without shrinking. "Good morning, Constance." There was a pause on the other end. Constance had expected silence, or tears, or fear. She did not expect Sophia's voice to sound so calm. "Sophia," Constance said carefully soft. "This has gone far enough." Sophia leaned back in her chair. There it was. Not "how are you?" Not "I'm sorry." Not "what my son did was cruel." Just control, dressed in concern. Constance continued. Her voice lowered into the tone of a mother speaking over a hospital bed. "You need to think about the family name. This is not just about you and Reginald. There are employees involved. Families. People who depend on Ashford Holdings. If this agreement falls apart, hundreds of innocent people could suffer." Sophia closed her eyes for 1 second. Employees. Families. The family name. Constance had placed them on the table like candles around a coffin, hoping Sophia would kneel. But Sophia had heard these words before. When Reginald forgot to come home, Constance said marriage required patience. When he dismissed Sophia in front of investors, Constance said men under pressure needed understanding. When rumors about Lavinia began moving through the same circles, Constance pretended not to enjoy. She said successful men attracted attention. Now that money was at risk, suddenly everyone's pain mattered. Everyone's pain but Sophia's. "I have thought about the employees," Sophia said. Constance exhaled relief too soon. "That is why I knew you would be reasonable." Sophia opened her eyes. "No, that is why I'm requiring oversight." The line went quiet. Sophia continued, each word steady. "If the company survives, it will not survive so Reginald can keep pretending nothing happened. It will not survive so relatives can keep taking money from accounts they never helped build. And it will not survive under the same people who brought it to the edge of collapse." Constance's voice sharpened. You are letting personal humiliation cloud your judgment. Sophia almost laughed. Personal humiliation. As if Reginald had spilled wine on her dress. As if he had not brought his mistress into the family dining room and praised her as the woman who belonged there. Constance, Sophia said softly. Your son publicly disrespected his wife. Another pause. Then Constance sighed, tired and offended. Reginald made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an appointment. Sophia's voice did not rise. What he did was a choice. Constance's silence hardened. You are still part of this family. Sophia looked down at her bare finger. For years that sentence would have pulled her back. Family had been the word they used when they needed her money, her patience, her silence, or her name. Family meant she should absorb the blow and smile so no one else felt uncomfortable. But Sophia had learned the truth. In the Ashford house, family did not mean love. It meant obedience. I was part of that family yesterday, Sophia said. While everyone watched, Constance's breath caught. For the first time, she had no polished reply. Sophia let the silence sit between them. Not as punishment, as proof. Then Constance spoke again, quieter. If you destroy Reginald, you destroy yourself too. Sophia looked toward the window. Morning light moved across the glass buildings downtown. The city looked clean from this high up, almost gentle. I'm not destroying Reginald, she said. Her voice was calm enough to break stone. I'm letting him stand without me holding him up. Constance whispered, You'll regret this. Sophia picked up her pen and looked at the revised agreement on the table. No, she said. For the first time in years, I think I won't. Then she ended the call. Grace watched her from across the room. Sophia placed the phone face down, took one slow breath, and signed the first page authorizing a full independent review. Not the rescue. Not yet. Only the truth. And somewhere in the Ashford estate, Constance lowered her phone and finally understood something she should have known long ago. Sophia Pennington could still save the company, but she was done saving their pride. 3 days later, the Ashford estate no longer felt like a home. It felt like a courthouse. The long dining table had been cleared of crystal glasses and silver trays. In their place sat laptops, legal folders, audit reports, and bank representatives who spoke in calm voices that made Constance's skin crawl. Every number was reviewed. Every transfer was questioned. Every family expense was placed under a light so bright no one could hide from it. Sophia sat at the far end of the table, not in the wife's chair, not beside Reginald, at the head. Grace Mitchell sat to her right. The bank's restructuring team sat to her left. Robert was there too, quiet, humbled, no longer pretending he had not seen the cracks forming for years. Reginald sat across from Sophia. He looked different now, not ruined, not forgiven, just stripped of the performance. No perfect speech, no easy smile, no Lavinia beside him touching his arm at the right moment, only a man facing the wreckage his pride had helped create. Constance, however, still fought the truth with every breath. This level of oversight is excessive, she said, her voice tight. The lead auditor glanced at the report. Mrs. Ashford, the withdrawals alone require explanation. Constance lifted her chin. They were family needs. Sophia looked at her. Family needs do not include luxury renovations charged as operational expenses. The room went silent. Reginald closed his eyes. Constance's face flushed. But she said nothing. That was how the day went, one truth at a time, one buried decision after another. The expansion that had never been properly reviewed. The consulting fees paid to relatives who had never consulted on anything. The unpaid vendors. The delayed payroll warnings. The quiet panic hidden beneath marble floors and polished manners. By sunset, the conclusion was impossible to avoid. Ashford Holdings could survive, but not as it had been. The bank agreed to move forward only under strict conditions. Independent oversight, quarterly audits, frozen family withdrawals, a financial board with outside authority. Reginald would remain involved, but not unchecked. Constance would be removed from all informal spending approvals. Robert would supervise transition reporting, and Sophia's role would be formally documented in the company record, not whispered, not implied, documented. Reginald signed first. His hand shook slightly, then Robert, then the bank. Finally, the folder was placed in front of Sophia. Everyone watched her. For years, they had watched her to see if she would break. Now they watched her to see if she would save them. Sophia picked up the pen. She did not rush. She read the final page again, especially the section acknowledging her personal guarantees, her prior financial support, and her required protections going forward. Then she signed. The company lived, but something else ended. Constance looked away as if Sophia's signature had insulted her more than the collapse ever could. Reginald stared at the paper, then at Sophia. "Thank you," he said quietly. 2 simple words. Too late for the marriage, but not meaningless. Sophia nodded once. "You're welcome. No warmth, no cruelty, just closure." Outside evening settled over the lawn. The fountain kept running. The estate still stood. The family name had not vanished. The employees would keep their jobs. The company would open its doors the next morning, but the old Ashford kingdom was gone. No more secrets hidden behind Sunday lunches. No more pride disguised as tradition. No more treating Sophia Pennington like a silent ornament while depending on her strength to survive. She stood, gathered her folder, and walked toward the door. This time no one ordered her to stay. This time they all understood. She had saved the company, but she had not returned to her place. She had taken it. Sophia stepped out of the Ashford estate carrying only one folder and one hard-earned truth. She was not the woman who walked in days ago. That woman still hoped love could be repaired by patience. This woman knew peace sometimes begins when you stop asking people to value what they have already used. Weeks later, Sophia moved into a quiet apartment overlooking the city. No marble halls, no family portraits watching her every move. Just sunlight, fresh flowers on the table, and mornings that belonged to her. She returned to work under her own name, Sophia Pennington. Not Mrs. Ashford, not Reginald's wife, not the silent force behind another man's pride, her own name. And one afternoon as she signed the first contract for her new consulting firm, she paused. Her hand did not shake. For the first time in years, she was not saving a family that erased her. She was building a future that honored her. Never confuse silence with weakness. Some people carry the weight of a whole family, a whole business, or a whole relationship without asking for applause. But even the kindest heart has a limit. Respect the people who stand beside you before life teaches you their value through their absence. And remember this, walking away is not always giving up. Sometimes it is the first brave step toward becoming yourself again. Now, tell me in the comments, have you ever stayed silent for too long just to keep the peace? If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel and join us for more powerful stories about dignity, courage, and second chances.